No one expected the screaming to start in a medical symposium, but that's exactly what happened the moment the alien doctor scrolled too far down the human immune system files. The holo display flickered with unfamiliar words: measles, rabies, smallpox, flu, and then the line that made every species in the room recoil: deliberate viral introduction. Controlled exposure recommended for immunity development. The doctor's 6 hands trembled. You inject pathogens into yourselves? At the back of the chamber, Dr. Lucas Everett didn't even look up from his lukewarm coffee. He just said, "Vaccines. You're welcome." Silence followed, sharp, sterile, and heavy with disbelief. The room looked more like a cathedral than a classroom, a temple built for perfect aseptic biology. Suspended above the circular amphitheater were rows of glowing monitors, each cycling through thousands of medical entries, species histories, immunological records, evolutionary timelines. 57 sapient species had contributed to this archive, and every last one of them had taken the same approach to pathogens: avoid them. Only one had decided to shake hands. The Endurian surgeon who had triggered the uproar reeled back, his eyes blinking out of sync. "This is madness. Infection is to be feared. Controlled exposure leads to mutation, to contagion, to..." Lucas finally rose, mug still in hand. "To survival," he finished. The translation drones fluttered mid-air, stalled for a second. Even the linguistic AI seemed unsure whether survival and infection were supposed to coexist. A pale violet archivist from the Chelic delegation pulled up supporting data in a blur of frantic tendrils. Multiple records show this as a deliberate act. Earth year 1796. Edward Jenner? He scraped open a child's arm and inserted cowpox? What is this? "History," Lucas said, stepping down the tiers toward the center of the room. "You deliberately carry extinction-level pathogens in your children," the Endurian shrieked. Lucas gave a tired shrug. "We call that kindergarten." Chaos broke like a wave. Gasps, high-pitched squeals, wings beating in alarm. Some delegates stood, others disconnected their personal monitors with flicks of limbs, vines, or claws. One flammable blooded species, the Witari, began sealing their respirator domes. Only one being remained utterly still, a crystalline physician near the front, its form shimmering in refracted starlight. Slowly, it spoke. "They are not infected," it said. "They are evolving." Lucas smiled, the kind of small, exhausted smile you gave when someone finally understood. "Exactly." The council moderator, a wheeled cephalopod whose species had purged all disease 5 millennia ago, attempted to regain order. "Dr. Everett, please clarify. You voluntarily introduce pathogens into your population? For training?" He nodded. "That's the basic idea." Murmurs swept through the room like a fast-spreading code virus. The Endurian surgeon, now thoroughly agitated, demanded clarification. "But these are viruses, weapons of extinction. You don't train on death, you avoid it." Lucas's voice was calm. "Tell that to smallpox. We didn't avoid it. We eliminated it." The hollow sphere above him flickered again, this time displaying Earth's infection history across millennia. Dots appeared: red for infections, black for deaths, gold for eradications. The early timeline looked like a battlefield. Then, as vaccines appeared, the red faded. A delegate from the Xylan system, tall, feathered, eyes wide with what could only be horror, spoke slowly. "You exposed your offspring to modified plagues as protection?" Lucas sipped his coffee, winced. It was cold, better than burying half the species every couple of centuries. The room froze. Another alien, an archivist whose brain functioned like a living spreadsheet, pulled historical stats into public view. Humanity Earth's recorded population during the 14th century decreased by nearly a third due to a plague. Lucas nodded. Black Death. Killed a couple 100 million. And then, the Spanish flu? 50 million dead, give or take. Followed by COVID-19, which we managed to slow down with vaccines before it got worse. The silence that followed wasn't just shock anymore. It was something colder, something like fear. "They survived that," one medic whispered, voice nearly inaudible. "They endured." Lucas shook his head. "We didn't just survive, we learned." The crystalline researcher rippled gently. "But how did your bodies endure it?" "Pathogens adapt. Most species we lose members at the first mutation. How did you adapt so fast?" Lucas gestured to the archive. We made our bodies remember. That's what vaccines do. A disabled virus, or a piece of one, is introduced so the immune system can learn its structure. Once it's seen it, it never forgets. When the real one comes along, it's dealt with fast. Like, the Xylan delegate hesitated. Like soldiers trained for a battle? Exactly, Lucas said. Only the battlefield is microscopic. A new voice chimed in. This one belonged to a researcher from Tal Drun, whose species had glass-like organs and zero tolerance for biological contamination. You turned your immune systems into tactical units? Lucas considered, then said, more like intelligence agencies. They analyze threats, pass the data around, and mobilize when it counts. Antibodies are basically field agents. A long, slow exhale from the Tal Drun delegate. And if the virus mutates? We've got boosters, updates for the immune system, like software patches. That was too much. A sea urchin-shaped medic from the neutral belt of Delta V spun violently in place. Your medical approach is not curative, it is combative. Lucas nodded. If it works, it works. The council fell into a stunned quiet again. Not the sterile, contemplative kind. This one buzzed with low, worried energy. If Lucas hadn't known better, he might have thought some of them were afraid of him. One of the delegates, a stooped creature covered in slow pulsing bioluminescence, leaned toward the council console. I recommend an immediate pause in human biological studies until we can confirm these claims. No need, Lucas said. Run the genetic data. It's all there. The data core buzzed. Within seconds, holograms appeared. Human DNA overlaid with markers. Dozens. Then hundreds. Viral sequences, ancient and recent, embedded directly in the code. An insectoid immunologist, Dr. Sarth, scanned it. These are viral remnants. Not infections, they're part of the genome. Lucas nodded. Endogenous retroviruses. We've got over 100,000 fragments in our DNA. Some of them helped build our immune system. One of them, syncytin, even helps us form the placenta. Without that, no humans. The crystalline physician spoke again, its light dimmed slightly. You didn't just fight pathogens, you incorporated them. Lucas said it gently. We call that immunity. One delegate fainted, literally slumped backward in their seat, limbs twitching. The Taldrun researcher whispered something under its breath, a phrase that wouldn't reach galactic consciousness until months later. They weaponized extinction events. Lucas set his mug down. No, we just stopped letting them win. And then, the moderator's voice broke in again, sounding unusually hushed. The council will now enter a short recess for biopsychological recalibration. We will resume with simulation testing after recovery protocols. The lights dimmed, the hollow screens flickered into standby, and Lucas sat down quietly. His coffee was still cold. And outside, unseen by anyone in that room, the galaxy's understanding of medicine had just shifted forever. The galactic sun cycle had barely passed before the council reconvened. Quieter this time. Not reverent, just rattled. Even the air in the chamber seemed different, as if the filtration systems were second-guessing their own existence. Delegates returned with additional barriers, sealed suits, localized sterile fields, even portable air scrubbers. Some wouldn't sit anywhere near Lucas Everett, who now occupied the same spot, a tablet in hand, and an unopened protein bar in his lap. Above them, the hollow display flickered back to life, displaying the agenda for the second phase of the orientation. Immune response testing, model simulation, subject species, human, Terran. The moderator, speaking a shade slower than before, addressed the chamber. To ensure no cultural bias influences our interpretation, the simulation will model an inert alien virus interacting with human immune cells in a closed virtual system. Lucas leaned back. Go ahead, the immune system doesn't need luck. The Andurian surgeon, still visibly shaken, muttered under his breath. It'll need divine intervention. The simulation began. First, a harmless artificial virus, one commonly used in interspecies genetic therapy, was introduced into a mock-up of human tissue, scaled for observation. In most known species, this virus was ignored. It carried no active payload and replicated minimally. A biological placeholder? Within 4 simulated minutes, Lucas's immune system model identified it as an anomaly. Detection at first exposure, murmured the Xylan delegate. That's quick. The virtual white blood cells mobilized. Macrophages engulfed the invader, analyzed it, and began emitting signals. Within 2 more minutes, T cells were multiplying in response. B cells activated. Antibodies swarmed the invader with increasing precision. Another delegate pointed at the data stream. They're communicating. Passing molecular markers. Wait, those aren't just identifiers. They're targeting instructions. Standard ops, Lucas said. Immune memory is modular. We don't reinvent the wheel for every cold. The simulation accelerated. The virus was flagged, isolated, and neutralized. The entire immune system recalibrated and stored the sequence for later recall. But then, the programmers let the virus mutate a simple shift in surface protein structure. In most species, that's where immunity fails. Not here. The system flagged the mutation instantly. Not only did it adapt, it launched a preemptive response, modifying antibody production to counter potential variants before they emerged. The simulation stuttered. Warning signs blinked on the hollow display. Adaptive response detected. Immune system initiating predictive patterning. Processing rate exceeds known species baselines. The moderator leaned forward, one tentacle hovering over the abort switch. Lucas's voice was calm. Don't stop it yet, you're about to see the best part. The next mutation appeared. This time, the digital immune system didn't wait. It anticipated the protein shift before it occurred in full. T cells began preparing for a viral structure that hadn't even manifested. The system wasn't reacting anymore. It was guessing the enemy's next move. The display began blinking in yellow. Error. Immune response unpredictable. Warning. Simulation outcome total assimilation. The room froze. Then, red. All simulation terminated. Host immune response violates stability parameters. The hollow sphere dimmed as the system shut down, trailing heat from overloaded processors. A tech aide moved to reboot it and hesitated, uncertain if it was even safe. Lucas finally opened his protein bar. So, he said between bites, what'd we learn? The Taldrun researcher was the first to speak. You don't just defend against pathogens, you anticipate them. That's biological foresight. Lucas shrugged. Not me, my immune system. I'm usually just along for the ride. The crystalline physician tilted slightly. This isn't passive immunity, it's preemptive evolution. Not quite, Lucas said, brushing crumbs from his shirt. It doesn't pass to offspring automatically. We train each generation. It's why we vaccinate kids early. You build the memory from scratch, over and over. A winged delegate snapped. That's not evolution. That's warfare. Same thing, if you do it long enough, Lucas replied. The Andurian's voice shook. No, evolution is natural. This is directed. You shape your biology deliberately, under threat. You make peace with death, and then we tell it to wait its damn turn, Lucas said, calmly. The council went still again. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't even bravado. There was something unsettlingly ordinary in how he said it, like it was a truth so deeply ingrained in humanity that they didn't even question it anymore. A soft tone rang through the chamber. A message appeared at the edge of the central display. Genome retrieval authorized. Subject, human Homo sapiens. Display, viral imprint index. The archive illuminated again, this time with human DNA broken into strands. A flashing overlay highlighted sequences of viral origin, first in red, then purple, then blue. More than 8% of the genome lit up. Lucas whistled. Didn't realize it was that much. Dr. Sarth's mandibles clicked reflexively before catching himself. This is not infection, this is inheritance. The crystalline being pulsed faintly. You recorded your plagues into your children. Lucas nodded. Every pathogen that nearly wiped us out became a part of us. Sometimes they left scars, sometimes they left tools. But how can your bodies tell the difference? Asked the feathered Xylan. We don't. Not right away. Sometimes we get it wrong. That's what autoimmune diseases are. That's why vaccines take years to test. Every time we think we've figured it out, nature throws a curveball. But we get better. Through trial? The Taldrun asked. Lucas held up a finger. Through error. Lots and lots of error. The council was silent again. Until a whisper from an archivist in the second row. You're not a species. You're a feedback loop. Lucas gave that one a genuine laugh. Best compliment I've had all week. The moderator reactivated the display. Dr. Everett, the Council has decided to open a second phase of study. If you are willing, we request permission to continue cross-species analysis under controlled observational labs. Lucas tilted his head. You mean, you want to test more pathogens? No, the moderator said carefully. We want to study how you endure them. Your species may be the first viable model for resilient systemic integration. Lucas considered it. I'll talk to my team back at the embassy. But fair warning, our immune system is only half the story. The Endurian muttered darkly. What's the other half? Madness? Lucas stood, tucked the protein wrapper into his pocket. Adaptation. The willingness to suffer, learn, and try again, even if it kills us. The crystalline physician dimmed once more. It nearly did. And yet, here you are. Here we are, Lucas said, alive, mostly intact, better for the pain. He turned toward the exit. His presence still unsettled them, but now, it wasn't just revulsion, it was recognition. And, beneath that, a flicker of something stranger, hope. The next phase didn't begin in a conference room, it began in a lab. Lucas had expected white walls and soft hums of machinery. Instead, he found himself in a clean room sealed tighter than any terrestrial biosafety facility, surrounded by a dozen alien researchers wearing filtration suits that looked more like exoskeletons than uniforms. Only one dared enter without armor, the crystalline physician who had first spoken on his behalf. Dr. Everett, it greeted, light pulsing in calm, deliberate waves. I will serve as observational liaison. We are authorized to begin Phase 3 analysis, immunological history, physiological response records, and longitudinal exposure impact. Lucas raised a brow. You're going to study everything? Only what has been made available to us, the being said, including this. It gestured with a refracted beam toward a floating panel, a three-dimensional mapping of Lucas's own immunization records, live scanned from a med chip in his arm. Decades of injections, boosters, serologies, and titers, marked in a coded stream of colors and timestamps. The display scrolled. Tetanus, measles, hepatitis A and B, rabies pre-exposure series, yellow fever, typhoid, malaria prophylaxis, influenza annually 12 years in a row, COVID variants, multiple boosters, a few unfamiliar to even the younger human physicians, one marked simply as H7N9 experimental trial. The crystalline entity paused. These are optional? Lucas nodded. Some, others were mandatory. Depends on where you work, where you live, what you're exposed to. I've spent time in jungles, deserts, Arctic zones. You prepare for what might try to kill you. The alien studied him silently. You allowed unknown viral strains to be injected into your body during experimental phases? Well, Lucas said, not when they were live. Another silence. Why? Lucas crossed his arms. Because I've seen what happens when we don't. One of the alien assistants paused from calibrating the scanners. Explain. Lucas's eyes didn't flinch. We had a polio outbreak in Nigeria. One kid. Then dozens. It only took a month before we realized the vaccination rate had dropped below critical. 1% less coverage, and the virus came roaring back. I was there. It paralyzed children. I don't forget those things. A few of the aliens murmured, their neural translators pinging low tones of discomfort. I volunteered for the H7 trial after that, Lucas continued. Not because I wanted to play hero, because someone had to be first. A younger researcher, translucent skin, triangular pupils, pointed at another scan. This one. You were 12 Earth years old. What is it? Lucas glanced. Chickenpox. Before the widespread varicella vaccine, everyone I knew got it. You survived. I spent 2 weeks out of school, fevered and delirious, scratched myself raw, still have a scar behind my left shoulder blade. He peeled back the collar of his shirt. The scanner zoomed in automatically. This is how you build resistance? Asked the assistant. Not ideally, Lucas said. That's why we vaccinate now, safer than the disease. The crystalline physician rotated the panel again. Your kind considers illness educational. Lucas hesitated. No, we don't want to get sick, but if we do, we take the lesson. The being pulsed thoughtfully. Even if the cost is high? He nodded once. Especially then. A pause. Then, wordlessly, the lights dimmed, and the lab shifted modes. A larger holographic display formed above them, this time of humanity's generational viral evolution. Sequences from dozens of regions, from hundreds of years. Dr. Sarth, the insectoid immunologist, arrived at last, tapping rhythmically at a terminal. We have finished the genome analysis across multiple ethnicities and time spans. Results are not standard. Lucas didn't reply. He was watching the strands. Each decade showed subtle shifts in the human genome, some tied to culture, diet, or environment. But others bore the fingerprints of infection. Long-forgotten outbreaks had left behind alleles that help newer generations resist unrelated pathogens. "It's like armor," whispered one of the feathered delegates. "Woven from scars." "Some are even older," Sarth said, voice tight. "Sequences from over 10,000 Earth years ago. We believe one was the result of a hemorrhagic fever that is no longer in circulation." "And now?" Lucas asked. "Now," Sarth said, "it is part of the reason you can survive exposure to certain viral hemorrhages with only supportive care." Lucas exhaled. "I've had patients live through Ebola. One of them was my roommate in medical school. His brother didn't make it." The room paused. "You don't take survival for granted," the crystalline physician said softly. Lucas gave a small shake of his head. "Not once." Sarth looked directly at him. "We have never encountered a species that uses suffering as infrastructure." Lucas blinked. "We don't call it that." "What do you call it?" He looked up at the wall of red and blue DNA, still shifting with new discoveries. "Progress." The simulation team shifted gears again. They introduced another alien virus, one specifically engineered to mutate rapidly. Most species could not track its changes. But the model of Lucas's immune system didn't merely keep up, it began altering baseline parameters. As if bracing itself for an arms race, it fully expected to lose, then win. Another error appeared on the display. Immune model escalating response to level beyond baseline. Secondary response, modification of neutrophil behavior detected. Predictive countermeasure initiated. The moderator frowned. This model should be impossible. It is reshaping itself in anticipation of threats that do not exist. Lucas leaned forward. "Yeah, that's what we call the what-if factor. Every immune cell is trained to assume the worst. That's how we stop viruses before they get ahead." The crystalline physician studied the response curve. "But your systems burn energy. This kind of biological reconfiguration must cause damage." "It does," Lucas said quietly. "It's why some people get fevers, muscle pain, even organ stress. Sometimes the cure feels worse than the disease, but it's the cost of learning." Another hollow panel displayed data on long-term immunity. Years, decades, lifelong memory encoded in immune cells, waiting for the next fight. The Xylan delegate finally broke the silence. "You transform catastrophe into curriculum." Lucas turned. "We don't enjoy it, we just don't let it be wasted." The Taldrun researcher stepped forward. "And if the threat evolves faster than you can?" Lucas nodded toward the hollow tablet. "Then, we get sick, we build new tools, we try again." He looked at them, really looked. "You all thought immunity meant being untouchable. For us, it means being teachable." No one replied. But something subtle shifted in the room. A tone, a silence charged with reluctant awe. They weren't just studying an anomaly anymore. They were witnessing a species that had domesticated disease. And survived, by turning every plague into a page in the manual. The final hearing took place in the council's upper chamber, a dome of light and silence orbiting far above the central planet, where the oldest biological laws had once been carved into starlight. Only a few species were ever allowed there, and only by unanimous vote. Humanity, for all its volatility, had been granted provisional access. Lucas Everett stood at the central podium. No displays, no models, just words. The chamber was quiet in a way that could only be engineered. Noise canceled at the molecular level, air cycled without a whisper. Delegates sat in concentric circles, eyes fixed on him. No translation drones this time. Each seat was fitted with neural interpretive links. It meant no misunderstanding. It also meant no room for comforting vagueness. "You've reviewed our history," Lucas began. "Our deaths, our adaptations. You've seen our genome, our failures, what we've lost to disease." He paused, letting the weight of it settle. "But what you haven't seen," he continued, "is how that shaped the way we live." A soft flicker in the gallery above, observers from non-medical civilizations were now tuning in. "We're not fearless," Lucas said. We're terrified of disease. We've buried too many for that ever to change. But that fear is part of what drives us. It's not about avoiding death. It's about doing something useful with the time we get. A long pause. No fidgeting. No coughs. The kind of silence normally reserved for tombs. You think it's madness, he said, to inject ourselves with things that once wiped us out, to take dead plagues and feed them to our children in microscopic doses. But what you call madness, we call preparation. Vaccines don't just protect the individual, they protect the community. They form a memory across bodies. One of the council members, an elder from the Trask, leaned forward. Your species does not simply record trauma, you organize it. Lucas nodded. We build institutions around it, entire fields of study. We write books, build simulations, run drills. Disease taught us how to work together. Another voice from the side. Even at the cost of lives? Lucas didn't hesitate. Especially then. The crystalline physician spoke for the first time since arriving. We found a notation in your World Health Archive. A phrase repeated across several centuries. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Which one? The being's surface flickered. Never again. Lucas nodded. We say that every time we lose too many. It's a promise. Sometimes we fail, but it keeps us trying. And yet, Sarth said, stepping into the circle, many species in this chamber eradicated disease through genetic perfection. Pathogens no longer threaten them. They see your path as self-imposed suffering. Lucas turned to face him. Your systems are closed, clean, but they're brittle. A new pathogen from outside your biome wipes out entire colonies. Several delegates looked away. We've seen it, Lucas continued. On Mars Colony 10, the immunologically fragile species couldn't survive a mutated fungal spore we carried in unnoticed. 500 dead before we figured out how to filter it. He paused. And we did figure it out. Another murmur, this time not outrage. Respect. Your immune system adapts faster than we thought possible, said the moderator. It doesn't merely respond, it evolves mid-conflict. It rewrites itself. Lucas gave a slow nod. Because it's used to being outmatched. The only advantage we ever had was that we're too stubborn to stay dead. He took a breath. Everything that tried to kill us taught us something. We cataloged those lessons. Smallpox taught us how to prepare. Polio taught us urgency. Influenza taught us humility. HIV taught us the cost of neglect. COVID taught us that misinformation can kill just as fast as the virus. The chamber's glow dimmed slightly, as if acknowledging the names of fallen enemies. Lucas looked up. You call what we do unethical, reckless, primitive. But here's the truth. We're not trying to beat death. We're learning how to live with it, not in surrender, not in fear, but in recognition. It's part of us, so we study it, train on it, collaborate with it. He raised a hand toward the center of the dome, where an old inscription hung in ancient binary script. Preserve the living. Contain the dying. Lucas shook his head. You forgot a third part. Learn from the dead. Silence. Then, slowly, the crystalline physician pulsed with a ripple of shifting light. Dr. Everett, the council has completed its final vote. A sphere descended an iridescent core that recorded resolutions of galactic significance. Human medical methodology, the moderator said, will be granted its own classification, adaptive biological aggression. It is no longer considered malpractice. It is considered, the word took time to translate, iterative survival science. Lucas blinked. That's surprisingly flattering. A low ripple of laughter, restrained but genuine, passed through a few seats. The crystalline being continued. In accordance with this ruling, Earth is now authorized to serve as a research hub for immunological training. Several council species have requested exchange programs. Lucas smiled faintly. Just wait until you meet our microbiologists. More laughter, this time with less tension. Your people have done something few ever dared, said the tall drone liaison. You made infection not just a threat, but a tool, a collaborator. Lucas stepped back from the podium. We never wanted to be unique, but we've always known we had to be ready. He turned to leave. But before he reached the threshold, the oldest delegate of all, the crystalline physician, spoke once more. Dr. Everett, one last question. Lucas paused. If you were given the option to erase every virus from your past, if humanity could have evolved without them, would you do it? Lucas thought for a long time, then shook his head. No, because without them, we wouldn't have learned how to survive each other, either. And with that, he stepped through the door. Behind him, the council chamber sat in thoughtful silence, the kind that follows not horror or awe, but understanding. Across the galaxy, the ruling rippled outward. Medical schools rewrote their curriculum. Bioethicists debated until their tongues were dry. And on a dozen sterile worlds, quiet conversations began among species who had never considered that perhaps pain was not the end of the lesson. And in time, a new saying began to take root in hospitals far from Earth. They don't just fight death, it whispered. They collaborate with it.